Hello and welcome to Unsportsmanlike Conduct, the show where two British brothers talk all things NFL. I'm your host, Dom Corbs, and I'm joined by my co-host, Nick Corbs. And Nick, you owe me a beer.
I do, Dom. I was wrong. I was wrong about the Vikings, and I was wrong about Aaron Rodgers. You proved me wrong, and I'm going to hold my hands up. You were wrong. I know I was right. No, I was right. No, I was wrong. You were right. Sorry, it's been a long day.
It got there in the end.
So just about.
For those of you that are unawares, on one of our previous episodes, when we were talking about the first game, which is the Vikings-Jets, which we're going to start off the pod by talking about because I was in attendance, I said that I thought the Vikings defense would put a very experienced quarterback like Aaron Rodgers through his paces, and lo and behold, he throws not one, not two, but three interceptions in a single game, including a pick six. So then we've got loads of other things to talk about, but let's get right involved in the Vikings-Jets game. Nu, what was your take?
Well, yeah, Dom, I think the headline of this game is, does Aaron Rodgers still have it, or is the Vikings defense that good? I think that's what I personally took away from the game. He looked really old out there. I think that's what the biggest thing. You've probably seen it online, the one where he looks like he's been down in Fortnite. He's like crawling behind his offensive line. He looks old, looks grizzled, and he also looked a bit scared by that Vikings defense. I called it a gimmick before. I was wrong. I don't think it's a gimmick. I think it's real, and I think it's legitimate. And I think that Vikings defense was absolutely sensational today.
We were sat in the seventh row behind the goalpost, so we were literally within touching distance of Aaron Rodgers for one of the big hits that he took when he did start crawling on the floor like he was needing to be revived in Fortnite. And I think with Rodgers, it's really interesting because he doesn't look washed, quote unquote, in the sense that someone like a Peyton Manning did when his arm was shot, or like a Russell Wilson does now. It's not the physical aspects of his game that has declined. It's more the fact that he's just making decisions that he wasn't making before, which really ill-advised and very out of character for Rodgers and his game. And his age, though, I think you're right to bring up, is that he's at that age now where and has the severe injury history with the Achilles, where now when he takes a hit, everyone's like, oh, is this it again? Is this fine? Because he is, 42, 41? I can't even remember off the top of my head. 40 plus.
He's not a spring chicken by any means.
No, he's no spring chicken. So he's at that age now where any hit he takes, we're all wincing in the crowd, being like, "Oh God, have we just seen the end of a goat's career?" Essentially, and it's concerning. I think that he's on the floor like that after multiple plays in this game.
Yeah, well, Dom, I think nothing illustrates this better than the final drive of the game. How many times have we seen Aaron Rodgers pick apart a defense with a minute to go, score a touchdown, everyone celebrates? He didn't look the same when he threw that interception. I had to rewind the TV. I was so completely shocked because vintage Aaron Rodgers, if you want to call him that, would have never have made that mistake. And to make three picks, obviously you're right, one of which was a pick six, none of them were good picks either. They were bad decision makings. It wasn't tip drills. It wasn't wrong route. It was his fault and his fault alone. And it's very, very, very rare to see a player of his caliber make those mistakes in the big games.
Yeah, and I think I completely agree. I think the two of the three that stand out the most are the Van Ginkel pick six, which was, I think, just a chef's kiss, Brian Flores play call, which is essentially the Vikings are going to run slant, a really quick game, get the pass out, throw it, whatever. Van Ginkel fakes the rush and then drops back into coverage, picks it off perfectly. It was a great play call. It was a perfect play call in response to what the Jets were trying to run. And that was a pick six. That was the fifth pick six in Aaron Rodgers' career, which, by the way, is absolutely insane. He's only had 5 pick sixes up to this point, bearing in mind that Rodgers has been playing since 2006. He's got the lowest pick six rate of essentially any quarterback ever. And that was really interesting. The fact that happened, that was it was a great defensive play call, I think. It was the right one in the situation, and they got the better of Rodgers and they got the better of Nathaniel Hackett. The third and final one, though, which ended the game, because I thought, I was going to be in prime position. Rodgers and the Jets were scoring towards the end zone that we were sat in. I'm like, okay, we're going to see a vintage 2-minute Aaron Rodgers drive, and it's going to be just, the greats always know when to pull it out and how to finish a game off. And he threw what was meant to have been a back shoulder fade into the end zone to Mike Williams, and instead he leaves it low and inside rather than high and outside. It was off not by 1 or 2 yards, and Stephon Gilmore makes a one-handed grab we saw with Cam Taylor-Britt a few weeks ago. It was a bad throw. there's just no way to cover that up. It was a bad throw for the situation. And the game's over. And Rodgers finishes the day with 25 completions from 55 attempts, 244 yards passing, 2 touchdowns and 3 interceptions. And what stood out the most to me, being at that stadium, was two things. First of all, how the Jets offense is not deadly. It's not scary. It's not potent. It's not an offense that anyone is fearing at the moment. But also, and I was definitely guilty of this, is that the Rodgers-Wilson connection is terrible. And it is a far, far, far cry from the Rodgers-Adams connection that I and many others thought that it would be like.
Yeah, Dom, I'm just as surprised as you are. Same with Breece Hall and Wilson. I thought this would be one of, if not the best quarterback wide receiver duo in the league. We saw what Garrett Wilson did with winning Rookie of the Year with Zach Wilson. He looked absolutely electric. And now somehow maybe it's the sleeves, Dom. Maybe the sleeves have just made him lose so much aura that he can't run about anymore. But I don't know what's happened to him.
I hate that sleeve thing.
I hate that sleeve thing.
And there was like a Vikings defender who also had it. Like, you're right, Nu. Change those sleeves and maybe Garrett Wilson might be half decent.
Yeah, but also, Don, what I would say is I don't think it's quite full-on panic time for the Jets quite yet. I think they've got enough talent and I think their defense is good enough that I could still see them reaching the playoffs after a 10-year hiatus.
I know, I agree with you. Like, it's not panic stations, obviously, but I think with the expectations we have of the Jets, it almost kind of is. Like, what's their record? Are they
2-3 now?
2-3. Like, they're below 500. They've not exactly had like a murderer's row to start the season. Yeah, of course, the Vikings are a strong team and they played other strong teams along the way. And the Broncos game, when the weather's like that, it's a great leveler, right? It's a great leveler. But there are some teams which have the same record as the Jets or better, which are bad teams. And I think you were right, Nu, to raise Breece Hall, is that he was on 2.5 yards per carry in this game. He got 9 attempts for 23 yards. And he had 0.4 yards per carry against Denver last week. And Rodgers is not playing at a top 10 level. The connection between Garrett Wilson and Aaron Rodgers is off. The running game is not firing like it should be, particularly with regards to Breece Hall, who should be one of the best running backs in the game. The offensive line is better, a lot better, so it can't all be put on the feet of that. And frankly, it's not gelling at the moment. It feels like a roster which has been put together, handpicked, and someone's gone, I want this player, I want that player, I want this player. But there's no cohesiveness between those players or their play style or anything. Like, why is Alan Lazard still getting like considerable game time? Why? Like, I bet on him to get a touchdown because he's a banker, because Aaron Rodgers adores that guy. Why is Alan Lazard, in the year of our Lord 2024, still getting touchdowns from Aaron Rodgers? Like, there's just something not quite right with the Jets at the moment, and I can't quite put my finger on it.
Yeah, no, Dom, I completely agree. And when I was watching the game yesterday, I weirdly thought about basketball and the Phoenix Suns. So just bear with me for a sec. We're not an NBA podcast. I'm very
Let him cook.
But the Suns, they got in Kevin Durant, Bradley Beal, Devin Booker to try to make this super team. But it just didn't really work. It feels like they're trying to make almost like a basketball team. They're trying to get the best individual players and trying to make them work together, even if they don't quite coalesce. And I just don't think it's working. I think they pulled out all the stops. Wilson, Hall, Rodgers, Sauce Gardner's going to be on a pretty penny pretty soon. But they're just not working together as a team. And I don't quite know enough about the Jets' background to know what the exact problem is. I think we'll find out later in the year. Is it coaching? Is it the quarterback situation? But they need to put it together sooner rather than later.
I almost think that they're all feeling the pressure a little bit. This is the last ride for the current regime. It's that simple. And I think with the Bills playing as well as they are, the AFC East is no walk in the park for the Jets. They're not going to storm the division. Yeah, they don't have to worry about the Patriots. Yeah, they don't have to worry about the Dolphins anymore. But the Bills they should have beaten us, the Texans, last night if it wasn't for some insane play calling at the end of the game, or at least been in that game with a chance to win it. And I think that's the problem, is that they're all acutely aware that this is the last dance. This might be Rodgers' last season. I think with the way that he's getting hit and taking a while to get up, he's aware that it might be his last season. I think there's that feeling that it's all or nothing. And it's very hard for a team to live up to that expectation when even teams like the Cowboys don't have that expectation. Everyone just worries about them when it comes to the postseason. But no one expects them to get kind of those 12 wins because their division's so much easier. It's not really about that. It's when they make it to the postseason. But at this point, people are asking themselves, or at least I am, are the Jets even definitely going to make it to the postseason with the record that they have. So I think that's the question. But then to bring us on to the Vikings defense just quickly as well, I think it's the best in the league at this point, right?
Yeah, it's hard to say otherwise. But yeah,
Like
I would probably say so.
The scouts this team this unit has now collected in CJ Stroud, Brock Purdy, Aaron Rodgers, and that was the whole conversation that me and you were having, Nick, is that you're like, oh, they've only beaten young quarterbacks, and yes, of course, CJ Stroud is great, and yes, of course, Brock Purdy is a good quarterback as well, but it's about the experience, and can an experienced quarterback kind of carve it up? And I think that was a right issue to raise, because that is certainly possible. We now know that at least in Rodgers' case, isn't true. But Brian Flores, man, like, he's going to be a head coach next year. And I think in a league which has been dominated by offensive systems, particularly the Shanahan-McVay offensive system for so long, I think it could be a really, really interesting swing back of the pendulum to have a defensive system which can beat the dominant offensive systems in recent years.
Yeah, I think it's when offenses progress, so do defenses. And I feel like this is an example of a modern defense evolving to deal with that Shanahan-McVay system.
Yeah, I just think and Brian Flores, man, like, that guy is absolutely cooking. But here's the thing, is that this system now wasn't as good as it was last year. It's the best it's been this year. Like, Brian Flores hasn't just become a defensive coordinator, like he has been with the Vikings for quite some time, and he was with the Steelers before. It's because all of his players are versatile. So that will take a while, obviously, if he does become a head coach, for the GM to draft the relevant players and for the free agency for them to sign these certain players. So it'll be really interesting to keep an eye on in the offseason when I think Flores does inevitably get a head coaching role, how long it will take for his new defense to become like this Vikings one. But then quickly before we move on, because we have spoken a while about this game, but it was a great game.
It was a good game.
Is the Vikings offense. I thought this time, for the first time, that Darnold did not only not play well, but also the stats also didn't help him out in terms of, like, okay, well, stats can be different to performance. So Darnold didn't have a good performance, and he didn't have the stats either. He kind of turned into a bit of like old Sam Darnold almost. He had 14 completions from 31 attempts for 179 yards and 1 touchdown. That was a ropey, at best, I think, offensive performance. And I think it's clear that the defense is now carrying this team. I am a big fan of the offensive system. I'm a big fan of Kevin O'Connell. Obviously, Justin Jefferson is amazing. But I think that this offense, as is always the case with most offenses, is it can only go as far as Sam Darnold can help it get that far. He's not carrying it, but it can only go as far as he can go. And I think that answers the question, and that some people were bizarrely asking a few weeks ago, which is, would the Vikings trade JJ McCarthy now for a first? No, that's ridiculous. Yeah. They're not going to trade away JJ McCarthy. I think Darnold is good, which is what I said from the beginning. But I think now that's what we know him to be. Is good, but not that good.
Yeah, and Dom, that's why, despite everything, I'm still sipping my haterade. I'm still not massively on the train. I think they're a good team. I think they made the playoffs. But this team just gives me the shades of the losing, never heard of her Steelers. When they went 11-0 in 2020. The diva receivers, good defense, quarterback playing above his means. I reckon they're on the clock. It's only a matter of time before they cave in.
I think that's so rude, man. The Steelers and the Eagles of last year were the two frauds. I think the Vikings will inevitably lose some games. There will inevitably be a time where Sam Darnold turns into a pumpkin and throws an interception to lose a game, of course, right? They're not going to go undefeated to the Super Bowl. That's just not on anyone's bingo list. But I think they're a good team. I think they're the best team in the league at the moment. I genuinely think that. I genuinely think they're the best team in the league at the moment. I don't know who you could put to the Vikings.
Well, that might transition us on to what I think is one of the best teams in the league, in the Ravens, and in the game with the Ravens versus the Bengals. So, Dom, what do you think?
So, I would say that the Cincinnati Bengals defense is about as useless as a red light on GTA. Their defense has allowed opponents to score on 60% of their drives. Not red zone drives, new. They get the ball from a punt, from a kick, whatever, and they score 60% of the time. The red zone drives, when you get into the red zone, they score on 83% of the time. And 43% of drives reach the red zone. That the Bengals are literally half a team at the moment. They're the 29th ranked run defense. They're allowing 151 rush yards per game. Now, they allowed 175 against the Ravens. And they just cannot get to the opposing quarterback. They're joint 30th in sacks per game at 1.2. That's untenable. You cannot beat a team, particularly one like the Ravens, if you cannot pressure their quarterback. And that's the bottom line.
Yeah, Dom, I completely agree. I said in an earlier episode that the Bengals are just a fundamentally poorly built football team. And I think this game showed it more than anything. For the Bengals, you had Jamar Chase popping off. Two amazing touchdowns. T. Higgins had a touchdown reception. Joe Burrow was absolutely on fire, playing amazingly. But they weren't able to put it together. Compare that to the Ravens, who have three tight ends that scored a touchdown. Having three solid tight ends, obviously different system, but having three solid tight ends was actually more beneficial than having two superstar receivers. They have a solid run game and a solid defense, and the Bengals have neither. And Dom, you highlighted the Bengals at the start of the year as someone who you think could go from worst to first in the division. And I agreed with you because a superstar quarterback can drag a bad team along. But I think the flaws of the Bengals are too deep, too fundamental. And I just don't see them getting past 7, 8 wins this year. I think they'll be a losing record and one of the worst, not worst teams in the league, but on the bottom half.
See, here's the thing with the Bengals, right? Is that I completely agree with what you said about them being a fundamentally poorly built team, and I'm going to come on to that without spoiling anything in our kind of hot seat takes at the end. But I think I was kind of half right about the Bengals. It's the offense. Their offense is good. Well, it's not even their offense, really. Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase have been the offense. Joe Burrow was 30 completions for 39 attempts, 392 yards, 5 touchdowns, and 1 interception. Jamar Chase had 193 yards from 10 receptions and 2 touchdowns. They're fifth new in points scored. They're fifth. They've scored the 5th most points in the league. They've scored 30 points over the last 3 games. They are a fumble away from beating the Patriots. And actually, really, they had that bogus touchdown taken off the board. They would have won that game. Fumble away from beating the Chiefs. 1 stop away. If their defense could literally get 1 stop in, they would have beaten the Commanders. 1 stop away from beating the Ravens. Again, similar case. If they could have got a stop, they could have won that game. They're essentially managing to snatch defeat from the jaws of victory every single time. And they're a coin toss, I think, away from being a 3-4 win team. And that's the irony, and that's why I said even last week I doubled down and said I think they could still do it. Is their season dead at 1-4? Highly likely. I think the schedule from here on out, barring the Ravens again, is pretty decent for the Bengals. But I think this is why I have a problem with people going, winning's a quarterback stat. Oh, Joe Burrow, he's cooked. 1-5. Joe Shiesty. It's ridiculous. Joe Burrow has played as well as he ever has over the last 3 games. Yeah, he had a shaky start, but that's kind of what we've seen with quarterbacks that have had serious injuries. It takes you a while to come back, especially when you don't have a preseason. Essentially, the first 2-3 games of the season were Joe Burrow's preseason. He's put it together now. He looks great. Jamar Chase looks great. It's just everything else.
Yeah, Dom, I agree, but also shoulda, woulda, coulda. Am I right? So many teams, the NFL is often, it's called the witching hour for the reason, where wins become losses and losses become wins. Because the different talent, the talent difference is so small that those fumbles, the better coaching, the one more defensive stop, the one more sack, even though it doesn't show in the scoreline, that's the difference between great teams and good teams. And the Bengals do not have that outside of Joe Burrow. And that's why I do not think they will be able to progress to the postseason.
I think you're right, New. I think I'm being a little bit of an apologist here to the Bengals, but I'm a big Joe Burrow truther. I think if we can take away anything from the last few weeks, if we can take anything away from the last 3 weeks the Bengals have played, it's that Joe Burrow is still the guy. I think anyone that's questioning Joe Burrow or his ability to lead a team to potentially a Super Bowl, I think is a moron at this point. He's clearly playing well. He has played well throughout his career. It's just this kind of silly one-upmanship of Allen, Burrow, Mahomes. I think, you can probably put Allen clearly as number 2 now just because of longevity and height of play. But if Joe Burrow's not in your top 5, top 7, I think you're just wrong, frankly. But then talking about high-level quarterback play and going the complete other way, we have to talk about Deshaun Watson and the Browns. What the hell is going on in Cleveland?
Yeah, no, Dom, it's bad. It's really big panic stations. And in my opinion, it's time to start Jameis Winston. Deshaun is done. His career is over. I saw on Barstool Sports that at this point, you could probably even call him a worse quarterback than a human being. I'm not sure if I'd go that far, but he is...
I saw that too.
Yeah, but he is not good enough. And I don't know what's happened to him, Dom. As a Texans fan yourself, you would have seen Deshaun, when he beat Tom Brady in New England, and he was really the future of this league. He should be with Allen and Mahomes and Lamar. And when you talk about the best quarterbacks, we should be talking about Deshaun. But ever since his trade to the Browns and that massive, massive contract, he can't put it together. And I don't think it's the coach's fault. I don't think it's the receiver's fault. I don't think it's the O-line's fault. I don't think it's the running game's fault. I think it's his fault. Not only does he throw interceptions, make bad plays, but he also makes the Browns defense stay on the field for so long. That Browns defense is good. Myles Garrett, Grant Delpit, you've got players all throughout that Browns defense, but they're getting scored on because they just can't stay on the field for 40 minutes a game. Your defense can't be good for that long. He's so bad, he's affecting every single part of that Browns organization, and they need to get rid of him.
Yeah, man. Deshaun Watson has been a cancer to that team ever since they signed him. And frankly, I think right now in the league that there are 50 quarterbacks that are better than Deshaun Watson.
Yeah.
All 32 starters, and I mean all 32, even including Will Levis, the clip farming merchant at the moment, who is, swan diving and giving the ball to defenses. I would rather have Will Levis than Deshaun Watson right now, hands down, absolutely hands down. Like, Will Levis at least has NFL level traits with that arm of his that we can at least work with. Deshaun Watson is making his team tailspin. I think all 32 starters are better than him. I think the Browns have two better quarterbacks on the roster than him right now, in Jameis Winston and Dominic Thompson-Robinson. It stuns me as to why he's still being able to trot out there every Sunday and help the Browns lose games. And I think it's just made all the more ironic when Baker's playing well, Joe Flacco's playing well. Frankly, you're like, what's gone wrong? What's gone wrong is that Deshaun Watson has not played good football since 2020. That's the bottom line. He's not been a good quarterback for multiple years now. It's not like, he's still trying to find his way back. This is who Deshaun Watson is. I think any Browns fans out there still trying to take some copium by going, let him settle in. My guy, he's settled. He's just terrible. I can't put it to you in any plainer English than that. And what it reminds me of, is the sunk cost fallacy, which I've got the definition of here, which is the phenomenon whereby a person is reluctant to abandon a strategy or course of action because they've invested heavily in it, even when it is clear that abandonment would be more beneficial. It is literally the perfect definition of what is happening in Cleveland right now. The money's gone. The $230 million that you ridiculously gave him to play quarterback for you and guaranteed that money is gone. You were fools to have that point in his first year where you paid him like the league minimum, like $200, whatever the hell it was, so that he could get all his money because he wouldn't be able to receive the money that he was given in the contract when he was suspended. That's on you. Like, that's you as a franchise saying, we're going to sign a terrible bloke who has shown that he's not that good at football anymore in the hope that he can make our irrelevant team slightly more relevant. And it's just so infuriating because the Browns are a team, I think, that everyone wanted to root for at some point. Like, I love Baker Mayfield because he played for the Browns to an extent. Like, who doesn't want an underdog story? Who doesn't want a crap team to become good? But the Browns, who, apart from their own fan base, even some of them might themselves not be rooted for this team anymore. It's better, I think, to eat the biggest dead cap in sports history, which will be about $140 million, and just rebuild for 2026 with Arch Manning or whoever the hell else comes through the draft by that time, than to keep wheeling out the corpse of Deshaun Watson in the hopes that he suddenly manages to find the form that he was in over 4 years ago.
Yeah, I agree, Dom. Hope the door hits on the way out. No one's sympathetic to him. The Browns.
How can you be? He's a terrible. Putting all of the play aside, he's an awful human being. Like, it's just insane.
It's just insane. And you're right, Dom. The Browns, especially with Baker, they were going on social media. Everyone they had that Hard Knocks, that 0-16 season. They got free beer when Baker drew. Everyone was really, really rooting for this up and coming team in a place without hope. And we all wanted the Browns to succeed. And then they took that, signed. We can't stress it enough, a disgusting human being who's also a disgustingly bad quarterback. And now, who cares about the Browns? Dom, as you may have seen the London games, everyone's got jerseys in the crowd from different teams. You would not be able to find a Browns jersey in there. And 5 years ago, Baker Mayfield would have been everywhere. He's killed this franchise, and I feel bad for the Browns, but I do not feel bad for him. I can tell you that twice.
I know, exactly. It's like an Aesop fable, It's like the Browns could have had so much, right? They had a quarterback that, he was struggling in Cleveland, in Baker Mayfield. I think we can, maybe say that was probably the right thing for everyone to get rid of him. But look at how Baker was treated. He played through an injury, and then they cast him aside, and then they got the red carpet out for Deshaun Watson, and he's played terribly since then. And Baker's revived his career. It's just it's a real tale into essentially owners meddling in the team,
very good point, Dom. Very good point.
And just thinking that they know best. And to bring that on then to the next almost portion of our pod, which is the hot seat. I don't know why Deshaun Watson hasn't been benched. Stefanski came out after the game yesterday and immediately said that he is still the quarterback, which to me is really weird because even if a quarterback plays badly in that scenario and you're not yet ready to kind of give a knee-jerk reaction, you say, oh, we'll continue to look at all options into next week. You know, a classic coach speak. To come out and immediately affirm that he's still going to start after the Browns are 1-4. He's played terribly apart from one game in the last 3 seasons. Are the owners not letting Kevin Stefanski as the head coach bench Deshaun Watson? Because I don't really. Maybe I've got my tinfoil hat on. Maybe I'm
doing
a bit of an NFL conspiracy theorist. Yeah, but to me, it suggests that the owners are not letting Kevin Stefanski bench Deshaun Watson.
Yeah, Dom, I do tend to agree with you. Obviously, that is hearsay, conjecture. We don't actually have any evidence to back it up. The evidence is that he's terrible and he's still playing. And so
our lawyer Paddy can protect us from any conjecture.
We'll get our lawyer Paddy on. But Dom, you see it with David Tepper and the Carolina Panthers. Incompetent ownership trickles down to every single level of the game. And that's why, obviously, Shador Sanders, there's that whole thing of, would you ever let your son play for so-and-so team? And Dion said no. I don't think Shador Sanders is good enough to do that, but that's an issue. There's these teams that are fundamentally poorly run and will always be poorly run because of their owners. And I just feel so bad for Browns fans because if I'm a Browns fan right now, I don't see any hope. There's no light at the end of the tunnel. Your ownership was going to remain, is going to run that team into the dirt. There's no future. There's no hope. And I really just feel for them because I don't really want to live in Cleveland either. And to have that and have a terrible football team is not a good mix.
I completely agree. And the reason why I brought this up is because we're now onto our final segment of the pod, which is the hot seat. So kind of determining players and coaches that might be fearful of their jobs. And I put Browns/Stefanski because I can't really understand. You can't have, let's say the Browns end up with 4 or 5 wins. Heads have to roll. Something has to change. If they're not going to get rid of Watson, are they seriously going to fire Kevin Stefanski, who's a 2-time coach of the year? Frankly, if Stefanski, as the literal head coach, can't make decisions about his football team, which are as important as benching a quarterback that is playing terribly, I think he'd want to get out of there. But then who would ever want to replace him? Who would ever want to apply for a job knowing that you're essentially a puppet of the ownership and that really you don't have any say over your football team? And we've seen really good offensive coordinators, defensive coordinators, but specifically the offensive coordinator from the Lions. Remember his name?
Ben Johnson.
Ben Johnson last year go, you know what? No, I'm not going to take a head coaching role. I'm going to go back. No self-respecting offensive or defensive coordinator would look at the situation in Cleveland and think, I'm going to leave what was obviously going to be a successful position because they're in a position to get a head coaching role. Why would anyone ever leave? So I don't really know what they're going to do at the end of this season. They're not going to win enough games to make it to the playoffs. So something has to change. But what?
Yeah, Dom, that's a very fair point. I always think almost like trench warfare. You're going over the top. You know what you're going in for. You probably know you're not going to come back. Why on earth would anyone ever take that job? And you saw it with Canales now at the Panthers. I think there is a bit of a similar, situation going on. Incompetent ownership, causing the team to be dysfunctional. And that people always need head coaching jobs. They do, but they're not going to be good enough. These are people who this is their only chance, their only shot. People won't even want to interview for the Browns, to be honest. And you're so right, Dom. I'd rather be an OC on a good team than be head coach for the Browns.
You said it yourself last episode, Newt. You get one shot of being a head coach, for the most part, right? Why would you waste it? Why would you waste it on a terrible situation like that? It's so for me. I don't really know what they're going to do. It doesn't make sense. They've kind of checkmated themselves by doing what they have done by not being able to bench Deshaun Watson, which to me is the only possible option here, because I don't know why I'd get rid of a good head coach like Stefanski. But for me, the bottom line here is that nobody wants to go there, player or coach. Why do you want to go to a team that refuses to get rid of its worst player, like that's making them play badly? It's just it boggles me. But then, who is there anyone that springs to mind for you with the hot seat? Because I've got quite a few, so you can push it to me if you don't.
Well, off the top of my head, the one that's really obvious, despite their win, is Doug Peterson and the Jacksonville Jaguars.
Yeah, nice. I got that.
I think he's gone, to be honest. I don't really think it matters how they do for the rest of the season, unless they somehow make the playoffs and get a playoff win. He's done. He's a dead man walking. He's a lame duck. And I think what he's been able to do with Trevor, who I've seen Trevor live, John, you've seen Trevor live, an amazing talent that has never been able to reach his potential despite the contract he's getting paid due to pretty poor head coaching jobs. Obviously he had Urban Meyer in his first year, now Doug Peterson. And he's not doing the best with the talent. I don't think he runs a good offense. I don't think he runs a good defense. I don't think he's good player management. And to be honest, I think he's done.
He was on my list as well. Him and Trent Baalke, who I think has been the worst GM in the NFL for quite some time now. Yeah. They almost lost a game against Joe Flacco and a subpar Colts team to win their first game of the season. And the ultimate irony is, I tweeted at the time that they almost managed to lose a game where they were playing pretty well in, which I think is the sign that things are wrong from the top down. And yet, Trevor Lawrence hasn't looked great this year. He's been overthrowing receivers. He's made some weird decisions. He did it in the game in this game where he threw like a lofted ball into double coverage to try and get a touchdown. Trevor Lawrence is not playing the best version of football that he can play. And that's concerning in and of itself. And I think Doug Peterson has had enough time now with Trevor to have hopefully done something, and he hasn't really. And I think for me, and Brett Coleman tweeted this, and I've been pounding the Trent Baalke hate train for as long as I've been able to. I think the 2020 draft class was the undoing of the Jacksonville Jaguars. Their first round pick, CJ Henderson. Second first round pick, Kayvon Chason. Second round pick, Laviska Shenault. And then it's a bunch of literal nobodies that I can at least remember. Maybe Ben Barch is still on a roster somewhere.
That is a howler.
You've taken a whole draft class where you've had 2 first rounders and you've set fire to it. You took Trayvon Walker over Aiden Hutchinson. I don't know how Trent Baalke still has a job. I think that the Jags should be a better team than they are because we all know how many draft picks they've had in recent years and how high those draft picks have been. And what do they have to show for it? Honestly, Brian Thomas Jr. is playing really well, sure. Yeah. But other than that, what do they have to show for all of this? So I think they need to clean house. They need to get a genuinely good, high-level, offensive-minded head coach in Ben Johnson maybe, and just start again with Trevor Lawrence. But I agree now. I think Doug Peterson and Trent Baalke are definitely on the hot seat. I would also say, linking to what we said earlier, that Zach Taylor should be in the hot seat, the Bengals coach. He had the ball on the Ravens' 38-yard line in a situation where the next score wins. Joe Burrow had been dealing all game long, and he calls 3 straight running plays, which netted total of 3 yards. He essentially played to not lose rather than to win, and I think he's taken the Bengals as far as he can. You said yourself, that they're a football team that's rotting at the core, essentially, that they're kind of dead on arrival in a lot of situations. And I agree with you, and I think that starts with Zach Taylor. Lou Anarumo, the defensive coordinator, I think is a good defensive coordinator, but you can't not lay some of the defensive woes at his feet. Obviously, he can only do what he's got with the players he's been given, but it's hard to keep a defensive coordinator with a new regime who want to bring in their own guys. So I think Lou Anarumo is definitely a positive as a defensive coordinator and will definitely find another job, I think the net positive of getting rid of Zach Taylor is necessary to then potentially cut Lou Anarumo loose as well. And I think Duke Tobin, the de facto GM, has also been terrible. He's since 2011, he's been the GM for the de facto GM. The only good players he's drafted are Joe Burrow, Joe Mixon, Jamar Chase, and Jesse Bates. Other than that, again, very few hits. So I think it's time to clean house.
Yeah, Dom, I think them and the Jags are almost quite similar. I don't think Trevor's the same caliber player as Burrow, but I do believe they're a good coaching and a couple good draft picks away from being a regular contender for the Super Bowl. And I know that for the Jags, that might sound crazy or far-fetched. When you look through their roster, there's a lot of talent there. Same with the Bengals. I just think it's not quite a restart or a reset or a rebuild. I'm not quite sure what the term for it is. Just like a rejig, a freshen up, a facelift, a makeover. is
A
what they
maker,
need.
exactly. Like a pimp my ride.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah. But
Yeah.
you know who I really want for that job now? I really want Joe Brady, the Bills
Yes.
offensive coordinator, to be the head coach there. I think that would be just perfect for me. And then to finish it off, the final hot seat I have isn't a coach, it's a player. And that is George Pickens.
Ooh,
I
I like that. I
think
like that.
I think that he is the most overrated wide receiver in the league. I'm sorry. He is a jump ball specialist, really, who makes loads of amazing catches, but as a result, everyone thinks that he's an amazing player. They're not the same thing to make an amazing catch, because the catches that he makes, he has to make because he has no separation. And if you watch one of the games in the preseason, he jogs. He doesn't try. His effort is so low on such key plays. Yeah, it's the preseason, but he's playing with Justin Fields. He's trying to play for his job at the time, like trying to become the starting quarterback. Like, if you're on the field, you're on the field. It's as simple as that. He's running crosses, jogging. He's being covered. He's not trying to cut around them. He's just letting them cover him, stand still. Like, it was raised by Dan Orlovsky. He was like, the Steelers have an offensive problem, not a quarterback problem. It's the fact that the receivers can't separate, and they don't have receivers that can separate. And Justin Fields needs that. And so I think that George Pickens, his seat as this kind of wide receiver one, quote unquote, kind of up there with the likes of Nico Collins or someone like that, is completely misplaced. And I think he's overrated.
Yeah, no, I agree. But the second question is: did anyone actually rate him? If you know Bull, you know George Pickens isn't very good. if you go on Instagram Reels, he's the best wide receiver you've ever seen. And I think that was the issue here. They weren't able to pay Deontay Johnson. Deontay Johnson's one of the top 10 highest paid receivers in the league now at Carolina. I don't think he's worth that money. But he was a big separator. And George Pickens was quite a good wide receiver 3, I thought. He has some traits there, but you're right, the issues with separation are glaring. But it's because he's such a big social media figure. He was he was out of Georgia, was he not? Yeah, he was out of Georgia.
Yeah, he was at Georgia, yeah.
He made the spectacular catches when he gets drafted in a shiesty watching the TV, and he's just staring over like that.
He's like a meme. He's a meme. He's like a meme coin. He's like Dogecoin.
He's a meme, but I think anyone who watches Steelers football or watches American football as much as me and you, Dom, never really rated him because he was never very good. He was just
we're bull
a
knowers,
big
We're bull knowers.
He was an Instagram player. I think that's how I describe him, and I think he's been
agree.
found out.
I think he's a good wide receiver too. I just don't think he's a wide receiver 1 at all.
Yeah, I agree.
Steelers fans are known for being very leveled in their opinion of their own players, so I'm sure they're all going to agree with what we said about George Pickens. But, that brings us to the end then of our Week 5 NFL review. The season is rolling on at this point, almost a third of the way through, which is absolutely revolting because it's the best time of the year, obviously. We are ever closer to our 100 subscriber goal. I almost said 100,000. I mean, imagine that. 100 subscribers. We're on like 84 at the moment.
It's not bad. It's not bad. Getting up there.
We're getting there, We're getting there. Trust me, 100. We're going to have a party. 100 subscriber special, nude as the pod topless. But so that brings us to the end of the episode. Thank you very much for listening. If you're listening on YouTube, please subscribe. We really appreciate it. If you're listening on Spotify, then please follow us. And also, if you're on YouTube, leave a comment. Let us know you're listening. I, as a social media manager, check all the comments, but I'll let know of any of the ones that send him hate his way. But I've been your host, Dom Corbs. That's been my host, Nick Corbs. Thank you very much for watching. We've been Unsportsmanlike Conduct.
See ya.